Our house received a visitation on a Friday. It landed on our front door. We didn't know what it was at first until my beloved saw on social media that many friends in the area started talking about having received a bag of compost from Mr. Fox. Mr. Fox is a composting company here in our area. For a nominal monthly fee, you can take all of your food scraps, your organic waste, you can throw it in a decompostable plastic bag, and they will come pick it up from your house and make it part of a giant compost heap. And every once in a while, they will also bring you your own bag of compost. We had no idea. This just landed on our doorstep one day, and we were looking at it like, is it a raccoon? Like, what might be in here? Turns out it's a wounded body bearing the marks of human sin. We've been using Mr. Fox for a couple months now. I can't tell you how good it feels to know that the things I'm throwing away will contribute to new life. It's this brand new feeling. I was born in America in the 1980s, and my culture taught me from a very young age to be a consumer. Commercials were targeted at me and other young people so that we would bother our parents and pester them into buying new, better products. The environmental movement also started taking off in the 80s, speaking directly to children. So I've lived my entire life in this dissociative state where I know it's my job, it's my role in this society to be a master consumer. And I'm also being taught that consuming at the rate that Americans do is destroying the one and only home we will ever have. Living with these two messages, consume, consume, death, death. It has made me and many of my generation oscillate between despair and apathy. So I really have a hard time sharing how healing it is and how good it feels knowing that as I throw food scraps and organic matter into this particular trash bin, I'm actually generating some good. Have you ever in your life received a gift on your doorstep for throwing things away? It's making me rethink what is possible. And of course, that is so very much what the Easter season is. Imagine going to a tomb with ointment to anoint the body of your fallen teacher, only to discover there is no body, there's no signs of death. That would cause you to rethink your assumptions of the world, wouldn't it? How can we proclaim to be God's Easter people if we aren't willing ourselves to rethink our practices and how we live our lives in light of God's amazing work of resurrection and reconciliation? Anais Nin said, "We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are." And that is certainly true for all of us who have been born and raised in this particular society. We don't see natural resources and natural beauty and nature and creation for what it is. We've been taught to see them as things to be consumed. We see things as we are. That's just how it is. What alternatives could there be? We have an economy to help along. We have human lives to live. We consume resources as needed. How else could it possibly go? That's where our faith starts going to work. One of the benefits of living our life according to our faith is that it offers us these brief pauses, these brief moments in time where we can stop seeing things as we are. And if for but a moment, we can begin to see things as God is. The opening sentence of the Bible, all the way in the book of Genesis, it talks of a time before God created heaven and earth, when all was wild and waste. It paints a picture of a vast, primordial, chaotic nothingness until God called things into being. Light, sky, earth. And as God called these things into being, God started separating them from one another. Not separating them and isolating them, but separating them so that they would live in relationship with each other. And the dynamic project of creation began, and God called everything that was made good. God looked at an eternity of waste and birthed from the chaotic nothing an eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. All so that the universe could witness love in action. As the beloved disciple writes in John's first letter, we know love by this, that he laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for one another. Little children, let us love, not in word or speech, but in truth and action. God does not see waste. God sees possibility. Where humans see death, God sees new life. Where we see things to be used and consumed, God sees beloved. When Thomas the Apostle heard the news about Christ's resurrection, he could not hear that news. He could not hear that news as God would tell it. He could only hear that news as he, Thomas, could hear it. He could only hear it as he was. He had recently watched his teacher, God's Messiah, his friend, die on the cross. He was surely traumatized, as anyone would be. He could only hear death, suffering, grief. He must have been scared. He must have felt defeated. He was grieving this deep loss. He could not hear as God hears. Life, possibility, creation. It was only when Christ came and visited all the disciples with Thomas there, when Christ appeared with this wounded body, bearing the marks of human sin, showing his hands to Thomas, inviting Thomas to come and touch the wounds in his side. It was only then that Thomas believed. And perhaps belief is just another word for seeing things as God is, rather than seeing things as we are. Belief in creation from chaos. Belief in possibility from waste. Life from death. There comes a point when we each are offered an encounter with the eternal. An encounter with the mystery. An opportunity to touch the wounds of a consumed creation. An opportunity to see up close and personal that there is no separation between life and death. It's all one big shared process. An ongoing dynamic relationship between what has been born, what is evolving, what is decaying, and allowing death to lead to new life. It's only if we're willing to accept that invitation to see as God is, to hear as God hears. It's only then that we can finally start experiencing this reality for what it is and rethinking how we live in it. I think we resist the good news of resurrection and new life when we've decided our options are limited, that there are no alternatives. And that's seeing things as we are. That's not faith. That's not seeing as God is. I think we only fear death when we fear change. And change is a natural byproduct of God's eternal life. Friends, do not be afraid. Do not let your precious life be devoured by this consuming culture. Let's be trees. Let's allow God's love to abide in us. Let's worry less with preserving our own lives the way we know them and laying down life for the sake of others, so that this universe can witness love in action. If we're willing to accept this invitation and dance into God's eternal glory, we will find ourselves transforming today's garbage into gifts for future life. May it be so.